there, Buttercups. Your resident Teabelle here. Welcome to Hark, 'tis the Teabelle. Let's dive in for that tea today, huh? So, as we do, Buttercups, we discuss the history of these squares or houses before we go on to the ghosty parts of it. So, today, Buttercups, for our beloved Savannah, Georgia, we're going to be talking about Monterey Square. Now, this square was established in 1847. It commemorates the 1846 Battle of Monterey, fought during the Mexican-American War. It's located on Bull Street between Taylor and Gordon, and it is definitely a more peaceful atmosphere. It has literary fame for Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, which is a movie as well as a book, and it was all based on a true story, which we'll be talking about today because I'm super, super excited. Now, there is something that's really unique about this square, and that all of its structures, with the exception of the United Way building, are truly originals. Now, in the center, you'll find the statue of what they call the Casimir Pulaski Monument. It's really it's a tall statue of a wounded soldier in honor of the General Pulaski. And this man was a young Polish nobleman who fell as a hero during the American Revolution. Now, there are some people who speculate that an unknown revolutionary soldier is buried there, but some think it is him himself. So, that I do find it interesting. And so, he was mortally wounded during the siege of Savannah in 1779. And he is remembered as the father of American cavalry. So, of course, they wanted to honor him, which they seem to do with squares in Savannah. Now, located on the southwest end of this square is the Mercer Williams house. And this is the house that we're going to be talking about next for I want to say infamy, because there is a little bit of it being tainted, but you can make your decision on that yourself. The Mercer Williams house, Buttercups. It was already famous before it became infamous. Okay? Now, we know it's located on the southwest end of the square, and Mr. Jim Williams purchased the vacant home from Mercer in 1969 and lovingly restored it over the next 2 years. Inside the home, there is a Mercer Williams House Museum. Now, this house was also built originally by John Norris. We already know who that guy is. And the house itself has experienced deaths prior to its events surrounding Jim Williams. Now, in the house, that museum we talked about, it contains Mr. Williams' private collection of antiques and period furniture. One of the cool things about Jim Williams was that he was a very tasteful man. And when I say that, I mean that he knew what was, he knew what was worth selling and what wasn't. That was his job. And so he is a wealthy antiques dealer, okay? Now, the book, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, is a work of nonfiction. And it really is exploring the aftermath of this whole thing, and eventually leads to the end of Jim Williams' life. But I'm going to summarize this, guys, for you, because I'm eventually going to do a whole big deep dive on this, I swear. Now, what we do know is that Jim Williams had an assistant named Danny Hansford. Danny wasn't the best of assistants, but he got away with a lot of things because he was also Jim Williams' lover. Now, here's the thing. It was 1969, and it wasn't easy to be as free and open as people are now. So it was just that was his assistant. And that made sense for the time, you know. But another thing that is interesting is that it was who Jim Williams was as a person. Because if you know what Jim Williams was like as a person, then you can see that he was such an influential, extroverted person because he was a I wish I could have met him, guys, because I don't know how. I would love to have heard his stories. But when you read the book, you hear so much about these lovely, outrageous parties that he threw and how he was just the light of Savannah society. And he would, he could just say, "You're not invited," and it was a snub. So I think he was new money, to be honest. But he was a very interesting person. I'll get more into that though when we go through the book because do have the book and I'm gonna go through the movie at some point. So don't worry, we're gonna go into a very very deep dive. I promise you that. Now back to why this house is now infamous. Besides the original two deaths that it had. So let me backtrack a little bit. In 1913, the person who owned it at that point tripped over the second floor banister. He only suffered mild injuries, but he strangely died 3 days later. If he didn't really suffer any serious injuries, why would he die? Good question, right? Now, in 1969, there was a young boy chasing pigeons on the roof, and he fell over the edge and impaled himself on the iron fence below. Weird. Yes, I know it's very weird. I mean, I would ask why you would let a child, anybody, run on the roof, but that was the time, I guess. I don't know. But back to its most infamous murder, if we're being very frank. Now, we know about Jim Williams and Danny Hansford, his assistant slash lover. So, Jim Williams shoots Danny Hansford in his home. This is the Mercer Williams house, right? Well, Williams is going to claim self-defense because he is letting us know that Hansford was attacking him. Now, I said this man was influential in the town of Savannah. So as far as trials go, they had to go to trial 4 times due to appeals and a hung jury. And the final trial moved to Augusta, Georgia, which resulted in his acquittal. But the fact is that that's not even why there's so many questions. They say, it is said, that where Danny Hansford fell to his death, that's also where Jim Williams fell to his death. If that's true, I don't know. But then I have also heard that if you go through the house and you ask about certain things, they will escort you out through the gift shop. So, I'm not sure. If you have any input, that would be fantastic. But the idea here is that when it comes to this house, there were little things happening, and it encompassed the whole of Savannah, guys. All of it. And with it encompassing Savannah, this author legitimately created such a picture of what he was seeing and what he was and what he was doing in that time. I highly recommend reading the book. I have it, it's on my bedside, but I haven't had time to go through and do a deep dive. But I definitely recommend it, and also watching the movie, because it is definitely worth it. And you'll understand. And maybe then, when I do my deep dive, you guys can throw some stuff, some facts at me. Maybe I miss. But at the end of this, Buttercups, the fact is that this house now can say it has 4 deaths, even though the last one I don't think was any kind of foul play. But I'm sure that the people who live there or go by it can feel the vibe of each and every resident that has stayed permanently. So we're going to another square. We're going to travel to Lafayette Square, which was named in honor of the Marquis de Lafayette. He was a French general under George Washington during the American Revolutionary War. This square was laid out in 1873, and the square itself has a centerpiece, and it is the semi-quincentenary fountain that the colonial dames of America presented to the city to commemorate the 250th anniversary of Savannah's founding, which is super, super cool. Now, this also has a very beautiful cathedral. It is the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist. It is beautiful, y'all. Absolutely stunning. It has the highest twin steeples in all of downtown, and it was designed by architect Francis Baldwin. The construction of this cathedral lasted from 1872 to 1876, which isn't really all that long considering. In 1898, a fire destroyed the entire cathedral except the outside walls and spires. They immediately began rebuilding and restoring. And 1 year later, in 1899, towards the end of it, the congregation celebrated their first Mass on December 24th. Now, Christopher Murphy, a Savannah artist, led the intricate design work for the interior. It finished 13 years later. In 2000, an extensive exterior restoration took place, and they replaced the slate roof. So it has had some work done. Being built in 1876, it would obviously have some work, but it is still gorgeous. Beautiful. Now it is on the northeast corner of the square at East Terrace and Abercorn Streets. So if you ever have the opportunity, I would very much think that you should probably take this opportunity and go, because it's gorgeous. Now, there is another house over there. It is the Hamilton Turner House, and it was the home of successful businessman Samuel Pugh Hamilton. In 1883, this mansion became the very first residence in Savannah with electricity. Today, it is a bed and breakfast place, and it's called the Hamilton Turner Inn. How awesome is that, though? It is the very first place in Savannah to have electricity in the 1800s. Can you imagine what it would have been like to be the person to say, hey guys, you want to watch TV? No, I'm kidding, you can't. No, they probably didn't. But you know what I mean? That how cool was it to have lights and not need candles as much? I have to assume it would be really, really awesome. Seated at 329 Abercorn Street is Savannah's Andrew Lowe House. It is a beautiful Italianate-style mansion with a history that transcends centuries, and a history that just so happens to include some of the most influential figures in American history. So now, this house is a museum. So if you want to take a stroll through Savannah's most beautiful gardens, or you feel like you want to see a historical mansion and its many, many antiques, you should visit this place. Now, The owners at the Andrew Lowe are not so enamored that their house is, haunted, but they can't change history. But we're going to go back on the history of the Andrew Lowe house. Andrew Lowe, at 16, left Scotland and came to the New World. He was a rambunctious teenager with ambitious bent, and this is why America was the best place for him. Now, when he arrived in Savannah, he went straight to work at his uncle's cotton firm. With hard work, he would later become a partner in the business. But in those first few years, he knew nothing but that if he wanted to become successful as a cotton factor, he needed to learn everything he could. This is where his ambition came in, and he did. So, 1843. He was a young man with the world as his oyster. He was wealthy, he had clout, and only thing he had to do now was marry and build a home of his own. So he did so. He married Sarah Cecile Hunter, and he began to dream about building a brand new ornate mansion in Savannah's most prestigious residential district. Now, he went and hired John Norris. You know that New York architect we talked about before? He designed and built this home in 1848. Now, this was when Norris was at the top of his prime. Okay? Now, Lowe, in addition, was also at the top of his prime. He was married, he had 3 kids, including a son, a beautiful house, a great job. Man, life was amazing at this point. It couldn't be better, right? Wrong. Before the Grand Mansion was completed, Sarah and the young son died of illness. Lowe was devastated, especially now that he was a single father of 2 girls. So when he did actually get to move into his new home, he was heartbroken. And this home was beautiful. It was equipped with intricate cast iron railings, side balconies that harkened back to the era of Romeo and Juliet. And this interior was just elaborate as the exterior. And the entire home was just a absolute perfect reflection of Andrew Lowe's rise to wealth. Now, of course he had to remarry. Okay. So not 5 years had passed when he married again. And he married Mary Cowper Stiles. And this was the daughter of William Henry Stiles, U.S. Minister to Austria. So now let's do a little reminding. He was married, lost his son and his wife, and now he had been a single father to 2 girls. Well, he remarried to Mary. Yes, try and say that 5 times fast. And then they would have a daughter. Okay. Now, this daughter would end up being a rather famous daughter, if we're being frank. Now, we also were told that lots of people had been in this house, famous people. Okay. This house was aesthetically pleasing, but a lot of famous people visited Andrew Lowe, or visited that house and probably Andrew Lowe over the years. Now, one of those people was the acclaimed English author William Makepeace Thackeray. From 1853 to 1856, he was a frequent visitor while he was giving lecture tours. Ironically enough, though, this man, Thackeray, was not at all a good student back in England, for the most part. He was, he was way too eager to visit wine parties. And he did spend 2 years at university carousing, so he eventually dropped out with no degree in hand. And for the next few years, this man, Thackeray, spent his time on the continent. More specifically, he spent his time getting soused with drink and with wenches. And This is where scholars believe that he developed gonorrhea. But, I mean, he did drink a lot and probably sleep around a lot, so that makes more sense. So, and they didn't have antibiotics, so bye, Mr. Thackeray. Now, in any case, he lost all of his fortune, 17,000 pounds that he'd inherited, which meant he actually had to work. So, journalism, then novel writing, became his life's work. So, when he arrived in Savannah as one of Andrew Lowe's closest friends, a very good friend to him, life for this man had turned around and blossomed into success with the writings of Vanity Fair, The Virginians, Cornhole, and other major works attached to his name. So essentially, he got to spend time in the Andrew Lowe house as a close confidant of this man after essentially doing what Andrew Lowe had done. Though Andrew did not waste his life doing those things that this man, Mr. Thackeray, had done, he still rose above it, did better for himself, and had a successful life. So there you go. Robert E. Lee. In 1870, he paid a visit to the city of our city of Savannah and Andrew Lowe. So when he arrived at the train depot with his daughter Agnes in tow, there was a massive crowd waiting to welcome them. Now, Savannah did give in to General Sherman, and his Union troops, but they were still very much a Confederate supporter. And when they saw Robert E. Lee, they were celebrating. So now they let Lee and his daughter move. They adjourned to the home of General Lawton for dinner before going to the Andrew Lowe house for some much needed sleep. Now, there is speculation that the ghost of Robert E. Lee is still said to haunt the Andrew Lowe house today. So if you're not a fan of him, don't go. But I'm going to be honest with you. I like ghosts. So that just makes it cool. Now, one of the things that we know about Andrew Lowe was that he did live a long and fulfilling life. He was a very successful cotton factor in Savannah, most particularly because they did ship the cotton to a factory in England. Lowe did serve as a brigadier general in the U.S. Army during the Spanish-American War. He was also a Confederate captain of the Civil War. He did spend some time in lockup after it was believed he was conspiring with the Confederacy during the Civil War, so that makes sense. In 1860, though, a new legend would be birthed, a new legacy would be formed, and that legacy was in the form of a baby girl who would be named Juliet McGill Gordon, who would, in her 20s, marry the son of Andrew Lowe and Mary Cowper Stiles Lowe. Well, looky there. Does anybody realize who this is? Okay, let me keep going. Juliet was more commonly and affectionately known as Daisy, and would become famous and wildly successful in her own right as the founder and president of the Girl Scouts. Now, though her marriage to the Lowe heir remained childless, they traveled all over the world. They lived in England, purchased Wellisbourne House in Warwickshire. They partied with the Marlborough set in England, and that is, Albert, the Prince of Wales. And even though they were childless, they were living their life to the fullest. Until William began to ask repeatedly for a divorce. And for years, our Juliet, or Daisy as she was affectionately known, stemmed off his request until she returned home one day in 1901 and found her husband's mistress living inside her home. Fuming, understandably fuming, but also heartbroken, Daisy finally agreed to the separation, okay? And that is, that's where it's terrible, but it was perhaps maybe a twist of iconic fate, ironic as well, that before the divorce proceedings were finalized legally, William McKay Lowe died of a stroke. Oh, I'm sorry. So before it was legal and she was his ex-wife, Mr. William McKay Lowe, the son of Andrew Lowe and Mary Cowper Stiles Lowe, perishes. And then the Girl Scouts were formed. Now, Daisy, as it happened, got the Lowe home. And she met Robert Baden Powell, a military hero, and also the founder of the Boy Scouts. It didn't take long before Daisy, was convinced to kick off the Girl Guides, which was the Boy Scout sister troop companion. What she started then in the UK found its way to American roots in Savannah when Daisy returned for her next trip. Now, in 1912, she recruited 17 girls to sign up for the American Girl Guides. And the first meeting of this was in the parlor of the Andrew Lowe house. By 1913, the Girl Guides name was put to the side in favor for the Girl Scouts. This is awesome. She persevered and had support from somebody who basically told her, here, do it in America, do it for the girls. And she did. Now, unfortunately, though, a little bit later, she was diagnosed with cancer in 1923. She kept it a secret. She didn't really want others to know. And in 1927, Juliet Daisy Gordon Lowe passed away. And she was apparently appropriately buried in her Girl Scout uniform in Savannah's Laurel Grove Cemetery. So, this, are we seeing a theme here, guys? Do you see it? I'm just being honest. Okay? Because not only did Andrew Lowe, the author William Thackeray, and Juliet Lowe all do something amazing. Did they not? They were knocked down, they got up, and they took everything and rebuilt to influence and inspire and create something amazing. The Girl Scouts are still going today. So, good job, Miss Juliet Daisy Gordon Lowe. Now, there are obviously more spirits in this house, I'm sure. Now, according to former employees of the Andrew Lowe house, there is another spirit that they have named Tom. He is friendly enough. He's content to continue playing butler in the afterlife. That was his job in life. He did it very well apparently. So now he continues to do it. Now, it would make sense because Tom doesn't always like when things are not put in the original position when he was alive, right? So he'll move them to where he thinks they should be. Now you can hear his footsteps as he plods about on all levels of the house. And sometimes you can see him standing at the top of the stairwell. He's always dressed in period clothing, and he is just generally an older, stately man. So, here's the question. Is that Tom the butler, or is it the rather famous Confederate General Lee? Now, if you want to believe those reports, then he said, I really like this house. I'm going to stick around. Now, that being said, just do we believe that they're stuck in one place? I don't believe so. I think they can choose where to go. But maybe this is just where he decided to stay. Now, we know that Lowe and General Lee were friends. The question of the day here is, were they such good friends, though, that General Lee decided to stay permanently on? Now, there is another rocking in this house that could have you going a little stir crazy. Now, something that somebody does is that they will rock in a rocking chair, which is a family heirloom and once belonged to the Lowe family. But who is it? Now, they think, a lot of people, that Andrew Lowe himself has set himself up in the chair, just kind of watching, observing, and enjoying the fact that so many people have enjoyed his home. So the question here is it just a great picture of thinking about Andrew Lowe in that rocking chair and maybe General Robert E. Lee just hanging out, or is it Tom the butler who makes sure that everything is running as it should? We won't know until somebody goes there and asks. Now, there are other ghostly things that happen in this house. There have been people who have caught the scent of perfume on the grand staircase. Maybe it's a leftover aroma from his second wife, Mary, who lived happily in the home until her death. Or maybe it's our beloved Daisy, whose ghost is said to still haunt this house. Is it Daisy or is it Mary? That's a very good question. Now, we know that there are many, many spirits here. I'm sure there's more than we actually know if we're being honest. But that being said, I think it's extremely interesting in the sense that when it comes to this house, not only did it represent perseverance, but it also represented lots of camaraderie. Well, Buttercups, it was nice talking to you, but unfortunately, real life beckons, and I have to go be an adult. But until next week, I hope you have a spectacular, spooky week.